Oh, thank you so much, Kumsa. Let's get into our first interview, getting reaction to last night's announcement. Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa has announced the easing of COVID-19 lockdown regulations, which will see a gradual and phased recovery of economic activity starting from next Friday. And the national lockdown was imposed last month in order to try and curb the spread of the deadly coronavirus. 75 deaths from the virus have been confirmed, with 3,953 cases so far in South Africa. Ramaphosa says that there will be 5 coronavirus risk levels. And he also says that South Africa is currently on level 5, which requires the most serious response and drastic measures. Dr. Bheki Mfeka, who is a developmental economist and former advisor to the Presidency, joins us now via Skype. Dr. Mfeka, good morning. Thanks for speaking to us on Morning Live.
Good morning, Sakina. Good morning to our viewers.
So first off, your overall response regarding the reopening of, albeit a phased reopening of the economy?
Well, overnight we have to reflect on the President's speech, and my initial reaction is that it needs to be refined. The model, the risk adjustment model, it does need to be refined for 2 reasons, Sakina. Firstly, the assumptions that were made are not taking so much into account the extent of the damage in the economy. Already, economists have factored in the fact that the immediate damage to the economy of the current lockdown is between 10 and 18% of the GDP. So if the model does not allow for immediate opening of the businesses, we may not be able to contain the economic catastrophe that might happen as a result. So you may be looking at further damage, which may exceed 18% that is estimated by the OECD. So the assumptions basically are that the lockdown as it stands, what the President now calls stage 5, is kind of an appropriate model, which it was necessary, but economists say it was not appropriate for our economy, especially because we're already in the crisis. So the model as it stands, with 5 stages, it's quite many stages, which can create confusion. I think if at least it can be 3 stages, which basically prepares business to get into operation, at least by the 1st of May, without any confusion. So I can elaborate further, Sakina, on my views on how that can be done. But I must mention, at least the President has left some window of opportunity for further consultations, especially with business, which is affected.
Now, speaking of that, Dr. Mfeka, and of course there are many competing interests and many competing views here. As you say, with regard to the economy, some people felt that this was perhaps a first world solution to go into what is this level 5 restriction and lockdown, when we in fact have perhaps a third world economy. So how do you balance the two? And then you look at some of the other criticisms, the EFF, for example, in reaction to last night's response, saying that if we are to go back now, given the spike that we saw yesterday being the highest daily spike and 318 new cases, where is the scientific evidence then to back up the easing of these lockdown restrictions, and perhaps warning against a premature easing of the overall restrictions? How do you respond to that?
Yes, I'm very critical of the model. I must state the principle of risk adjustment is well accepted, but the model put much weight on the appropriateness of the lockdown, which we all agree that is not appropriate for our country. because of the crisis we are already in. And secondly, it also put much weight on the issue of the capacity of our health system, which is already overburdened. And with the economic catastrophe, the health system will be overburdened more than the coronavirus can burden the system. So giving certainty to business is critical so that people can go back to work. As you would know, Sakina, for business, each day they take into account the cost. As the president was announcing, they are adjusting their models. So it means when the business is now not opening on the 1st of May as they anticipated, it's further damage and adjustments that are going to be made in business model, in cost exercises and all that, which we may see more announcements in terms of retrenchments and also closure of some businesses which were already vulnerable. And also it becomes, I can see many people think that it's single companies that will be affected. Some industries are vulnerable and can be affected, and it can lead to what we call market failure. For instance, the aviation industry. We're looking at SAA as probably the only company that is affected because of the known factors. But the entire aviation industry can be affected, which will mean that we may need SAA back into the market. That's an extreme assumption, but it's realistic given the uncertainty that the current proposed risk adjustment model is bringing into the whole picture. So it may create confusion. The best system, Sakina, would have been the model that sets the standards for all sectors. In other words, you create specific standards for each sector and then allow businesses to prepare themselves, and those that are ready can be authorized to go back to work on the 1st. Those that are not ready, especially in sectors that have been identified to be most high risk, where there are numbers, those may need more time to prepare, but the government should not dictate in terms of when they should go back. It should open, but they should be prepared with proper standards of as we all know, about the social distancing, the mask and all that, as they've done with the public transport. So businesses, especially those that are already hard hits, like your hospitality, you need to make sure that there's immediate and more simplified model for them to return to operations.
But can we take that risk, Dr. Mfeka, given that yesterday, of course, also the highest spike in positive cases reported also coincided with the highest number of tests performed? So what that would suggest, at least based simply on that, and I know that is really simplifying it perhaps too far, but if we were to test more and find out that the situation is perhaps more catastrophic than we think it is right now, how is that going to assist us if people are just going back? And can we really trust business to do the right thing? Because at the best of times, these things slip through the cracks. You talk about taxis, people adhering. I drive past taxis every morning and people are not adhering to the rules in place.
Well, I think it's important that we're realistic, of course, but the inconsistencies that are there in the proposed risk adjustment model. For instance, as we say, taxes will be allowed, people will still have to comply to requirements, and we trust that taxes will comply to requirements. I think businesses in general, if the standards are put forward to them and they have to comply before they open, and as we have seen, the security system is able to go house to house, it can also go business to business to check if the business are compliant and to check if those businesses that are opened are really having the authorization to operate. That can continue and be intensified on businesses. We cannot afford, Sakina, more uncertainty, because if you have 5 stages, you're really creating uncertainty, because the businesses cannot afford to plan with certainty if they are not allowed to operate. Some businesses, if you put up conditions today, they can, in few days' time, be ready to open with some of them. For instance, a good example, Sakina, when we allowed essential services to operate, like your supermarkets, they were ready immediately. They put on the protective gears for workers, and they put on glasses on counters and all that within a week time. So it's important that the model is simplified and there's certainty that businesses can go back to work. Otherwise, we cannot watch and say that we have the luxury. Economically, we don't have the luxury. Actually, as I said, what the damage to the economy will create worse impact than the coronavirus can be able to, because of the poverty we're already in, the unemployment. We know the attendant diseases that go with poverty and unemployment, of which we have so many of those in our country, which are killing more people than the coronavirus would. So my take is that we need a standard and allow businesses, give a chance to business to comply with standards of protection, and then let them go to work. Those that are not ready can be delayed, and let's get the economy moving. Otherwise, we are in serious trouble. I'm an optimist, but in this case, I'm saying we can be in trouble if the model is not simplified and strictly adhered to. Yeah.
And on that note, Dr. Mfeka, listening to the president last night, a bit of a warning to expect something, but not too much information, other than cigarettes and a vague reference perhaps to exercise, where still, the detail is lacking. It is to follow. Do you think that the president intentionally didn't want to give away too much of that information, or is it because there are still discussions underway?
Yes, I would think there are still gaps, because when the president says he still needs to consult with the business, that shows that there are still too many gaps, of which the ministers can fill. But I would think that those who are at the coalface of business are better positioned to assist in the process. I think also if the system or the interventions by government still weighs heavily on at the top, like a top down, it will not assist us to move faster, because it will still drag the processes and system, which will take time to get into normality. So what's important is that we give space for businesses and for civil society as well to prepare themselves. And when they are ready, they can come out and say, look, we're ready. These are the systems that we've put in place in compliance with the standards that you have imposed on us. The government can work with, like, the Bureau of Standards and other organizations to set those standards. Businesses, by nature, are compliance creatures, and they have to comply. And we've shown that we do have the security authorities that can implement the enforcement of those standards. So we can. So the business must be given certainty that by the 1st of May, it's possible to go back to work if you meet certain standards. Otherwise, I can tell you now, Sakina and the viewers, if it goes beyond 1st of May, the uncertainty, it will see more damage to the economy. We have development failure, but we'll see more market failure, which will create worse conditions for our country.
Dr. Mfeka, what do you think are the easier businesses to start with regarding opening up? And also, if you had to choose a few that would take a little longer to respond and reopen, which would those be?
Well, that's my problem with the model, because it seems to suggest that those businesses that have too many people involved, like your sports, recreation, transport, are those that can be delayed, which I strongly disagree. It also puts a priority to linkages as well as multipliers that each business carries, of which on paper it's good to think that way, but in reality every business is important because it has linkages, social and economic linkages. So it would be important to have a mindset that says every business should go back to operation. But of course, the conditions must be strictly adhered to in terms of social protection. If we can allow, for instance, the public transport to go back to business, we can allow other sectors as well, even with proper compliance conditions put in place, basically. Because if we think that in theory, those priorities of linkages and multipliers can be applied, it's an experiment that in practice can lead to disaster, because businesses, all business, even small business, even my business, if I don't get back to work soon, I'm in trouble. I can affect many other people who are dependent on me, and those who are providing inputs on my business, and the people I'm employing, and many others. So it's very important to think that way, that we need practical measures that are simplified and for business to be able to get back to work on specific time frames.
Well, unfortunately, we have to leave it there. I still have so many questions, but thank you so much for your time, Dr. Bheki Mfeka, speaking to us there about what we can expect, and also some of his thoughts about what the president announced last night. And he is, of course, a former advisor to the presidency. And, of course, we like to hear your views as well, as we expect to move into level 4 of this restriction next week. Let's take a quick break, and then we'll bring you the latest news.